My name is Ashley, and my husband. I never imagined he would betray me the way he did. Not just with another woman, and not even a beautiful one, but with money. The very money we built together. All of it. Every dollar. Every line of code. Every sleepless night. He didn't just cheat on me. He erased me, from the company, from our history, from his future. I was born and raised in Seattle, the kind of city where the rain never really stops and ambition has to push through the clouds to be seen. I was 26 when I met Daniel. He was smart, charismatic, the kind of man who could sell anything, even when there was nothing to sell. I didn't fall for his smile, I fell for his conviction. And I believed, deep in my bones, that together we could build something real. We started our company in a shared workspace that smelled like burnt coffee and dreams barely breathing. We had 2 old laptops, barely enough savings to cover 1 month of rent, and a ridiculous idea that the tech world needed something new. I took the reins on strategy, product design, business modeling, roadmap forecasting. Daniel became the public face, negotiating, pitching, convincing venture capitalists we were the next big thing. We were broke for the first 3 years. Then came a prototype, then a client, then a domino of yes. We had built an empire. Not overnight, never overnight, but through grit and sheer force of will. 11 years. That is how long we bled into the business. We celebrated every win with quiet dinners and hand squeezes under the table. We also survived every failure like it was a wound stitched in silence. But we were in it together. That was our vow, even more than our wedding vows, no matter what, we built side by side. Until, slowly, I noticed he wasn't beside me anymore. It started small. He began skipping strategy meetings, saying he trusted me. He brushed off my questions about financial updates. Then came the travel, trips that didn't show up on the calendar, vague responses about investor interest overseas, and calls that ended abruptly when I walked into the room. I wanted to believe it was pressure, the weight of success. Maybe he was just tired. We both were. One rainy afternoon, the kind of gray Seattle day that makes the past feel louder, I was organizing our home office and found an old tablet buried beneath invoices and notebooks. I charged it out of curiosity, expecting to see outdated app icons and maybe a few drafts of early presentations. What I didn't expect was the blinking notification waiting for him. It was an email. Dated 6 months earlier. From a private banking institution in Zurich. Subject line, Joint Account Confirmation, Daniel and Carla. There was an attached PDF. I opened it, my heart already tightening with something I didn't have a name for yet. Inside, clear, indisputable proof. A Swiss bank account, registered under my husband's name and a woman I had never heard of. Carla. I stared at her signature, electronic and detached, like her presence in my life was just one more line on a screen. Zurich. We had never been to Zurich. We had no business in Switzerland. He never mentioned it. Ever. And suddenly, all the long trips, the dodged conversations, the late-night calls, they collapsed into a single, burning truth: something was very, very wrong. You have to understand, I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't a woman who lived comebacks and scandals. I lived spreadsheets, innovation forecasts, keynote scripts. I lived in facts. But now the facts were screaming at me. My husband, the man I trusted with my life and legacy, was hiding a fortune and sharing it with someone else. Still, I didn't cry. Not then. Not yet. What I did was simpler. Colder. I picked up the tablet, copied the files, and started asking myself the one question I had never needed before: how far would Daniel go to erase me? I was about to find out. Because what lay ahead wasn't just heartbreak or legal war. It was the unraveling of everything we had ever said to each other. And what I would do in response, that's the part no one saw coming. Not even him. So if you're here to hear a story of revenge, think again. This isn't about revenge. This is about power. The kind of power you reclaim when everything is taken from you, and you decide to rise anyway. Stay with me. What happens next will change everything. I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling in the dark, my mind playing scenes like a projector stuck on loop. The email. The account. The name. Carla. I said it out loud a few times, trying to attach a face to it, a context, anything that would explain it away. But there was nothing. It was like discovering a locked room inside your own house and realizing someone else had the key all along. I spent the next morning digging. Quietly. Methodically. I made a fresh copy of everything from the tablet and uploaded it to a secure drive. I forwarded the email to a private inbox, removed all traces from the device, and placed it back in the drawer exactly as I'd found it. If Daniel noticed, he never said a word. Maybe he was too sure of himself. Or maybe he had already moved so far ahead in whatever plan he was hiding that he thought I couldn't possibly catch up. But I was already on the move. I began reviewing our digital archives, shared drives, old backups, inbox filters. We had years of data, tens of thousands of files. Most people would feel overwhelmed. I didn't. I've always had a gift for patterns, for finding the irregular heartbeat inside mountains of information. That was my role in the company, to sense what others missed. And now, that instinct was screaming. It was during one of those long dives into our past that I found another clue, not buried deep, but left as if it had simply been forgotten. A forwarded bank notification, timestamped at 2 a.m, sent to Daniel's old email address. Not his main one, the one he'd stopped using regularly years ago. But it was still active, and connected to an old sync folder on our server. Inside the notification was a link. I clicked it. There they were, several PDF attachments, all neatly labeled. Transaction confirmations, bank transfers, international wire receipts. Each document listed 2 account holders, Daniel Morrison and Carla Friedrich. The amounts varied, some as low as $10,000, others reaching into the millions. But what caught my breath was the heading of one specific file. It read, Joint Account, Zurich. That same phrase. Repeated. Confirmed. My stomach twisted. Zurich wasn't a mistake. It wasn't some financial fluke or outdated paperwork. It was real. It was active. And it was hidden from me, intentionally. I sat there in silence, the weight of the truth pressing down on me like gravity had doubled. He hadn't just lied. He hadn't just cheated. He had created a parallel financial reality with another woman. A secret future built with stolen bricks from our shared past. Still, I didn't confront him. Not yet. I needed more. I needed context, scale, clarity. Because if what I suspected was true, if Daniel was siphoning money from the company, if he was preparing to vanish, then one email wouldn't be enough. I would need proof strong enough to hold up in court, strong enough to tear through whatever legal web he might try to spin. And for that, I needed help. I called someone I trusted, Mia, my former executive assistant, who had since moved on to work at a private bank downtown. I told her I needed an informal meeting. I didn't give details, just enough for her to agree to coffee that afternoon. We met in a quiet corner of a cafe, 2 blocks from my office. I kept my tone casual, but my questions were pointed. How hard is it to move large sums overseas, under the radar? I asked. She looked at me carefully, then leaned in. If someone knows what they're doing? Not hard at all. Especially if the accounts are set up in the right jurisdictions. Like Switzerland? She paused. Zurich's one of the classics. Still airtight. I nodded, pretending to sip my coffee, my hands frozen around the cup. She didn't press. Maybe she sensed that I wasn't ready to tell her more. Maybe she knew better than to ask. After we said goodbye, I returned to the office with a storm building behind my eyes. I looked at Daniel differently that evening. I watched how he greeted me with a kiss on the cheek, how he asked about my day, how he joked about takeout. It all felt rehearsed. And I couldn't help but wonder how many nights like this he had lived with Carla in mind, planning his escape while sitting beside me. But I wasn't the same woman I had been 3 days ago. That night, I opened a private legal folder I had started years ago during a lawsuit scare. I added a new section. Title, Zurich, Suspicion. And I wrote one sentence at the top. He thinks I don't know. Not yet, I didn't know everything. But I was about to. I always believed numbers told the truth, even when people didn't. It was one of the reasons I had taken charge of strategy from the very beginning. While Daniel handled the stories, the pitches, the promises, the charm, I built the architecture underneath it all. And that meant I knew where every dollar in the company should be. Which made it even more disturbing that I could no longer account for all of them. So I decided to do something I had never done before, go around Daniel. There was only one person I trusted with this, Michael. He'd been our account manager at West Coast Capital Bank since year 3, long before we had real traction. He was discreet, by the book, and most importantly, he liked me. Respected me. When the company grew and our transactions started hitting 6, then 7 figures, Daniel became the point of contact. But I still knew Michael would remember who started the accounts. Who signed the original papers. Who designed the payment systems from scratch. I called him directly from a burner phone I picked up that morning. I wasn't being paranoid. I was being smart. Michael, I said, keeping my voice level, this is Ashley Morrison. I need to meet. Informally. And privately. There was a pause. Then a quiet, of course. We met that afternoon in a quiet corner of the bank's executive lounge, a room rarely used, reserved for clients who needed privacy. I brought only a leather folder and my calmest face. Michael smiled when he saw me, but I could tell he sensed something was wrong. That was good. I needed him cautious. I'm not here in any official capacity, I began, and I don't want any printouts or statements. I just need to look at the most recent activity, high level, in the main company account. I have a few concerns I'm hoping are just misunderstandings. Michael didn't ask questions. He opened his laptop, typed in a few access codes, and angled the screen slightly toward me. Just the main holding? For now, I nodded. The screen refreshed, showing a ledger of recent transactions. I scanned it quickly, my eyes jumping past the expected, payroll, supplier contracts, tax transfers. Then I saw it. A wire transfer. Dated less than 2 weeks earlier. Amount, $400 million. To an entity I had never seen before. I felt my heartbeat slow, then accelerate, not panic, not fear, but the rush of calculation. I leaned closer. Can you open that one? Michael hesitated, then tapped the entry. A pop-up appeared with transaction details, beneficiary account located in Zurich, Switzerland. Registered to a shell company, with signatories listed as Daniel Morrison and Carla Friedrich. There it was. In black and white. The full value of the company. Gone. I sat back, gripping the sides of the chair to keep my hands from trembling. Michael, sensing something deeper than a financial inquiry, lowered his voice. This was a clean transfer. Fully authorized on paper. I have Daniel sign off and, he stopped. Wait. He clicked again. Scrolling through metadata. There's a dual authorization signature here. One from Daniel. One from you. I froze. No, I said calmly. That's impossible. I never signed anything like that. I would remember. Michael gave me a careful look. Ashley, this was uploaded through our digital verification system. It passed biometric check. A forged signature. Faked verification. A digital lie in my name. That was when everything shifted. This wasn't just a betrayal. It wasn't even just theft. It was fraud. Deep, orchestrated fraud, executed with surgical precision. Daniel hadn't just planned to leave me, he planned to erase me from the company's very history. To make it look like I had willingly, jointly, transferred our entire fortune to a foreign account. And the worst part? If I hadn't found that tablet, if I hadn't followed my gut, he might have gotten away with it. Michael looked at me. He wanted to say more, I could tell. But his professionalism held him back. Ashley, should I be concerned? I met his eyes. Yes, I said. But not for me. I stood, closed my folder, and forced a tight smile. Thank you, Michael. You've helped me more than you know. Outside the bank, the wind had picked up. The sky was turning a steely gray, the kind that promised rain before the hour ended. I walked 2 blocks without feeling the ground beneath me. $400 million. Our company's full valuation. Sold, transferred, hidden, and my name forged to make it all look legitimate. I wasn't devastated. I wasn't even angry. I was focused. This was war now. And Daniel had no idea who he had just declared it on. The numbers would speak. And I was ready to listen. I spent the night staring at digital shadows. PDF overlays. Signature comparisons. Every document Daniel had supposedly co-signed with me, I reviewed them one by one. Not just the Zurich transfer, but others. Smaller ones. Quiet ones. Legal authorizations buried in folders with names like Q4 adjustments and board updates. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I couldn't. The rush of clarity was too sharp. By morning, the conclusion was absolute. Daniel had faked my signature multiple times. The Zurich transfer was the crown jewel, but it wasn't alone. Over the past 6 months, he had built a meticulous paper trail, a false narrative of my consent. I knew my own pen stroke. I knew the angle of my letters, the hesitation before the loop in my a, the quick slash at the end of my surname. What he used was close, but too clean. Too mechanical. Digitally smoothed. It wasn't just betrayal. It was criminal. I contacted my attorney, Vanessa, a woman I had worked with briefly during a patent conflict 5 years earlier. She was sharp, surgical, and fearless. I didn't trust many people with secrets this big. But I trusted her with this. We met in her office, a glass-walled room that overlooked the harbor, distant ships crossing like silent thoughts. I showed her everything. The tablet files. The bank transfer data. The forged documents. She didn't interrupt. She listened like a surgeon examining an X-ray before making the first cut. When I was done, she sat back and crossed her arms. This isn't just breach of trust, she said. This is fraud. And if you want to go after him, Ashley, we can. But you have to be ready for what it will mean. I'm ready, I said, and I meant it. We filed an emergency request for document authentication through a forensic analyst. Within 24 hours, I had the confirmation I needed. The signatures used in the transfer were not consistent with my legal biometrics. They were artificially generated. Traced from older contracts, slightly modified. The foundation of Daniel's scheme was now legally unstable. It was a counterfeit house of cards. Then came the real blow. As we pulled more internal files from the company's cloud archive, Vanessa found something that made her stop cold. A contract. Labeled, Asset Purchase Agreement, DCT Holdings. Signed and notarized. It was the sale. Daniel had sold the entire company. Quietly. To a foreign investment group operating under a shell entity. The same entity that received the transfer in Zurich. And the buyer had been told both co-founders had approved the deal. I stared at the document. There was my name again, etched in betrayal. But this time, there was a twist. Daniel had used an old notary contact from his side of the family. Someone based in Nevada. A name I recognized, his cousin's wife. The signature was notarized in another state, without my presence. A clear violation of federal notarization laws. Vanessa's voice cut through the silence. This isn't just forgery now. This is orchestrated fraud, wire fraud, and likely conspiracy to defraud an international transaction. If this gets to court, he's looking at prison time. I didn't flinch. I felt nothing. Only precision. We began the process of freezing what we could. Vanessa filed a motion to block all further asset transfers, invoking emergency protections under intellectual property law. She submitted a cease and desist to the holding entity listed on the sale. And she opened a channel with the Department of Treasury, the Financial Crimes Unit. We weren't just building a legal case. We were launching a recovery operation. But I still needed one thing. I needed proof that I was the rightful owner. Not just a name on a cap table. Actual, legal ownership. And I remembered something. Back in 2021, during a lawsuit threat from a competitor, Daniel and I had signed a quiet agreement to transfer full ownership of the company to me. It was temporary, meant to shield the company from a conflict of interest tied to his background in another firm. I never reversed the transfer. We had meant to, but it slipped into the chaos of growth, expansion, success. I had the original somewhere. And if I could find it, it would destroy everything Daniel was trying to claim. I went home, tore through drawers, files, backup drives. And then there it was, a scanned PDF, buried in a folder labeled legal, temporary. The document was signed, notarized, and unchallenged. It stated clearly, effective immediately, full controlling interest in Morrison Technologies shall reside with Ashley Morrison. All intellectual property, company equity, and decision-making authority is hereby ceded without condition. Dated. Signed. Irrefutable. My hands shook as I emailed it to Vanessa. This changes everything, she said. And it did. Daniel hadn't just betrayed me. He had tried to steal something that legally wasn't his. And I was going to take it all back. Quietly. Completely. And on my terms. The folder looked like any other on my old drive, cold, bureaucratic, buried under years of digital dust. But the moment I opened it, everything shifted. There it was. A single PDF. A scanned, signed contract from 3 years ago, forgotten until now. Its title was quiet but final, Transfer of Ownership, Morrison Technologies. I stared at it in silence. This wasn't just paperwork. It was a weapon. A key to everything. The memory came rushing back, late 2021, the pressure mounting from an intellectual property lawsuit tied to Daniel's prior business dealings. Our lawyers advised us to consolidate ownership under one name to protect the company in case his previous firm tried to claim rights to our platform. At the time, it was just a precaution. Daniel didn't resist. He trusted me, or so I thought. We signed the transfer in a quiet meeting with a neutral notary. The document was never reversed. It sat, quietly binding, as the years passed and our empire grew. And now, that document meant everything. It meant that as of 2021, Daniel legally had no claim to Morrison Technologies. No equity, no rights, no authority to sell anything. Which meant the Zurich transfer, the forged signature, the asset sale, all of it was null. All of it was fraud. I printed the contract, slid it into a protective folder, and drove straight to Vanessa's office. When I handed it to her, she didn't speak for a full minute. She read every word, cross-checked the date, scanned the notarization. Then she leaned back and let out a breath that sounded like a verdict. "This is your kill shot," she said. She contacted our financial forensics expert that same afternoon. Within hours, we had a preliminary brief ready to submit to the court. It detailed Daniel's fraudulent behavior, the forged authorizations, and most importantly, the ownership document that proved I was the sole legal owner of the company at the time of the sale. We filed an emergency motion for injunction. The goal was simple: freeze every account tied to the sale, halt any attempt to move the funds, and start building a formal fraud complaint. Vanessa coordinated with the bank, with Treasury officials, and with a private investigator specializing in international transfers. Everything was happening fast. Daniel had no idea what was coming. And I wasn't stopping there. I contacted our corporate accountant, who still reported to both of us. I asked him to prepare a financial snapshot of the company on the date of the Zurich transfer. Valuation, asset positions, liquid reserves. He had no reason to doubt me. I still held the executive credentials. As far as the legal system was concerned, I was the CEO, and had been all along. That night, I sat alone in my office, the city glowing through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The lights blurred slightly, like my focus was shifting forward, stretching beyond the present. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was building something, a recovery. A retaliation. A future. Daniel hadn't just underestimated me. He'd forgotten who had built this company. Who had written every plan, negotiated every pivot, survived every failure. He'd stolen with confidence. Now, I was going to take it all back, with precision. And without a word to him. The confirmation came from the most unexpected place, a flight desk assistant named Rachel, who used to intern for our company 5 years ago. We had barely kept in touch, but she followed me on LinkedIn and had always sent kind notes on our milestones. It was coincidence, fate, or maybe something in between that placed her at the right airport counter that week. I had called her after Vanessa suggested checking passenger manifests for international flights out of Seattle. We weren't sure it would lead to anything. Daniel was cunning. If he was planning to run, he wouldn't leave an obvious trail. But I was willing to try anything. So I reached out to Rachel, vaguely mentioned that I suspected Daniel might be flying soon, and asked her to let me know if his name ever popped up. She called me 2 days later. "Ashley," she said, whispering, "he's booked." I felt the air still around me. Booked where? Zurich. First class. 2 tickets. Daniel Morrison and Carla Friedrich. Departure is in 4 days, 7 o'clock in the evening. From SeaTac. I closed my eyes. So it was true. He was planning to disappear. To run off with the money, the new life, the woman he thought could replace me. Rachel continued, "It was weird. The reservations flagged VIP, but he didn't book it through a corporate account. It came from a private concierge service, pretty fancy. Did they check in already? No. It's still active, but not confirmed. They're holding it under a priority code." "Thank you," I said. "You've helped me more than you know." I hung up and sat in silence. For the first time since all of this began, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel betrayed. I felt clarity. 4 days. That was my window. In 4 days, Daniel would walk into that airport thinking he had won. Thinking he was vanishing clean, untraceable. He had no idea I was already 10 steps ahead. I met with Vanessa that evening and laid out the entire picture, the flight confirmation, the names, the date, the destination. She nodded slowly, a predator's calm settling over her. "We block the funds before then. If he tries to use those tickets, he'll be caught mid-flight, powerless." We expedited our injunction request, citing intent to flee with embezzled funds. The Department of Treasury moved faster than expected, likely due to the Zurich connection and the suspicious volume of the transfer. We weren't just protecting company assets anymore. This had become an international financial fraud investigation. Vanessa secured a judge's emergency ruling. The order froze every asset linked to the sale, flagged the Zurich account, and authorized a forensic trace on Daniel's personal banking activity. Within 24 hours, the funds were locked. The $400 million sat in limbo, unreachable to Daniel, recoverable by me once the court process confirmed my legal ownership. And based on the 2021 contract, that was a matter of time. Daniel had booked an escape. But he wouldn't make it out the door. And Carla? She would be walking into a future built on nothing but fraud and empty promises. I didn't tell anyone what was happening. I kept showing up to meetings, kept working late, kept pretending everything was normal. I didn't even change the way I spoke to Daniel at home. He was careful now, I could tell, watching me, testing for suspicion. But I gave him none. He was already gone in his mind. Let him stay that way. Let him believe he had pulled it off. Because on the day he thought he'd be flying to freedom, I would be watching his empire dissolve beneath his feet. And he would have no idea who pulled the thread. I never believed in vengeance for the sake of vengeance. What I believed in was leverage, quiet, surgical, and irreversible. And now, with the court order in hand, the forged sale exposed, and the Zurich account frozen, I was holding the sharpest blade of all, control. The day after the judge approved the emergency injunction, Vanessa moved swiftly. We contacted the Federal Reserve liaison assigned to international transfers, who confirmed the funds had been flagged and were being temporarily held pending legal verification. That meant Daniel couldn't touch them. Carla couldn't move them. And the holding company listed as the buyer? A ghost entity, legally powerless without verified authorization from both named principals, which, thanks to the 2021 transfer, meant only me. With the fraud confirmed, we submitted the ownership contract, along with the forensic analysis of Daniel's forged documents. The evidence spoke louder than any confrontation could. The federal caseworker's response was clipped and clear: "This is enough to initiate reversal and asset redirection. You are the legal recipient. $400 million. Not stolen. Not hidden. Reclaimed." But I didn't stop there. I used the window before Daniel's attempted escape to fortify my position. First, we updated the corporate registry, reinstating me as sole executive officer. The move was quietly filed at the state level, no announcement, no press, just bureaucracy turned weapon. Next, I restructured board access. Our private investor network, still unaware of the fraud, received notices that all executive meetings would be temporarily suspended pending legal audit. It bought me time. Time to build walls before Daniel even realized the doors were gone. I also reached out to internal cybersecurity. I didn't reveal the full scope, only that we had a breach involving false credentials and needed to update all administrative clearance. Passwords, accounts, VPNs, everything tied to executive privileges was scrubbed and reset. Quietly. Cleanly. And Daniel? He had no clue. He still smiled when he came home. He still sent emails as if he were the king of the empire. But every message he sent bounced into archives I now owned. Every document he opened was shadowed by recovery logs. He was navigating a kingdom that no longer responded to him, a ghost CEO in a company that no longer recognized his name. Meanwhile, Vanessa filed the formal redirection order. The funds, frozen in Zurich, would be returned, not to the original account, but directly into Morrison Technologies' main business holding, now fully under my name. It was the final cut in the silent operation. No media, no courtroom drama. Just numbers correcting themselves, one line at a time. By the end of the week, the reversal was complete. $400 million reappeared in our corporate ledger. Verified. Secure. Untouchable by Daniel. I remember staring at the balance on the screen that night, alone in my office. The number didn't make me feel victorious. It made me feel precise. Like everything had aligned, not by rage, not by luck, but by calculation. He had planned to take everything. He had executed a long, methodical betrayal. But I had turned every step of that plan against him, silently, efficiently, and without ever speaking his name aloud. This was no longer about heartbreak. This was legacy. And now, it was mine again. The airport was humming with its usual rhythm, announcements echoing, suitcases rolling, the murmur of strangers walking toward their destinations. I wasn't there, but I imagined it perfectly. I could see the polished floors, the massive departure board, the last-minute rush of travelers trying to catch a dream or outrun a mistake. Daniel was one of them. It was the evening of their departure. For days after I'd learned of the tickets. He arrived at SeaTac with Carla by his side, both dressed casually, the kind of curated relaxation that came with first-class boarding. Their bags were likely designer, their coats loose enough to hide nerves. They approached the counter with confidence. And then the shock hit. Rachel texted me the moment it happened. "They're here," she wrote. "Cards declined." He looks panicked. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I sat in my office, a closed-door meeting on my calendar, sipping tea as the empire Daniel thought he had stolen collapsed around him. I imagined the Look on his face, that slight tilt of confusion when the clerk says there's a problem, the flash of worry when the payment won't go through, the silent scramble as he pulls out his phone, expecting to fix everything with a tap. But the app would not help him. The balance was zero. The Zurich account was locked. The holding account he had used for travel expenses? Disconnected. The credit cards, tied to company assets, were cancelled the moment Vanessa filed the restructuring with the bank. To the world, Daniel still looked successful. But financially, he was already gone. Rachel's second text arrived minutes later. He's on his phone. Calling someone. Carla is furious. I could imagine that too. Carla, realizing the promise of a new life was a lie. Realizing she had given everything to a man who'd just lost it all without understanding how. And Daniel? He had built an exit strategy on a lie. But I had erased every step before he reached the gate. His fingers must have trembled as he opened the banking app. Expecting to see power. Seeing only nothing. I leaned back in my chair, calm, unshaken. This wasn't revenge. It was correction. A course reset. The day he thought he'd vanish into a new identity was the day he was forced to confront the old one, the one that had underestimated me. He tried to call me. I knew he would. The phone buzzed once. Twice. Then again. 29 times in 1 hour. But I didn't pick up. I didn't need to. He wasn't looking for forgiveness. He was looking for a way out. And I had already closed every door. The first call came before I had even closed my laptop for the day. I watched the screen light up with his name, the familiar buzz vibrating across the desk like an old ghost trying to claw its way back into my life. I didn't move. Just stared at it, letting it ring until it went silent. 30 seconds later, it rang again. And again. 29 times in 1 hour. It was almost poetic, the same man who had erased me from our company now trying desperately to reach the only person who could save him. He didn't leave voicemails, not at first. Just endless missed calls. But when I continued to ignore them, the messages began. Ashley, please, just call me. This isn't what it looks like. I can explain everything. The words were weak. Flat. Like even he didn't believe them. I sat with Vanessa in the main conference room, pen in hand, reviewing final documents for the formal reinstatement of my ownership with Federal Records. She glanced at my phone, saw the screen flash again. Let it ring, she said. I intend to, I replied. We spent the next hour signing contracts, initiating notices to our stakeholders, and formalizing the reversal of the fraudulent sale. It was clean, indisputable. The company was mine. The money had been recovered. Daniel's attempt to vanish had failed so completely that he now sat in legal quicksand, unable to move without sinking deeper. Meanwhile, the messages kept coming. Ashley, this is all a misunderstanding. You don't know what Carla told me. We can fix this. But there was no we anymore. That version of us had died the day he chose to forge my signature and sell the company we built as if I were just another checkbox in his plan. And now, watching him unravel in real time, I didn't feel vengeance. I felt finality. Around call number 15, he switched tones. You think you're smarter than me? This is still salvageable. But if you push, we both lose. Empty threats, grasping in the dark. Then came desperation again. Ash, please. I need you. I turned off my phone. For the first time in days, I walked outside. The city was soft with twilight, the air thick with the scent of wet concrete and blooming trees. Life was still moving, unaware that a war had just ended. That a woman had just reclaimed her legacy without raising her voice. Back in the office the next morning, my assistant greeted me with a curious expression. Your husband's been calling the front desk, she said. Should I keep rejecting? He's no longer my husband, I replied. And yes. Always. By midday, Daniel resorted to email. The subject lines became more frantic. Please. You don't understand. She set me up. You still love me, right? But I didn't respond. I was in meetings with legal, finalizing new contracts, speaking with investors, realigning departments. I was rebuilding the company, this time on terms that were only mine. Daniel was nothing but noise outside a window now, a man screaming from a distance, watching a future he thought he owned fade without him. And I was just getting started. It started with a headline. Tech giant Morrison Technologies reclaimed by original CEO after fraud allegations. I saw it as I stepped out of the elevator, the news flashing across the large screen in the lobby. My photo appeared beside the headline, me at a keynote 2 years earlier, confident, composed. Underneath, a short subline, Ashley Morrison regains full control after uncovering forged sale and offshore transfer. The article went viral in minutes. Every journalist who had once praised our rise now wanted a quote. Tech blogs, business outlets, even major financial networks began picking up the story. At first, the tone was cautious, reporting the facts, repeating what had been filed publicly. But soon, it shifted. Ashley Morrison wasn't just the woman who got her company back. She became a symbol. They called it strategic brilliance. A masterclass in quiet resilience. A calculated, bloodless coup. No one mentioned Daniel without adding fraud, forgery, or under investigation. The court documents had become public, and with them, the forged signatures, the secret Zurich transfer, and the legal ownership contract dated back to 2021. There was no spin Daniel could offer that would erase the truth. He was finished. The industry responded quickly. 3 partners from our former board issued statements distancing themselves from him. One of our lead investors praised my decisive and ethical leadership. Former employees reached out, many of them telling me how relieved they were to see my name restored at the top. I gave no interviews. I let the silence speak for me. But the damage to Daniel's name moved faster than any camera crew could. He became radioactive overnight. No company would touch him. No bank would extend him credit. He had gone from powerful to pariah in less than 72 hours. Meanwhile, I was back in the driver's seat. I reinstated key teams, restructured internal governance, and called an all-staff meeting. I stood in the center of the auditorium and told them the truth, not the scandal, but the mission. That Morrison Technologies had never been about one person, and never would be again. They applauded not because I returned. They applauded because I never gave up. Because while Daniel tried to run, I stayed and fought with the only weapon that mattered, the truth. The next morning, I walked past a newsstand downtown. My face was on the front page of 2 national newspapers. One headline said, Ashley Morrison, the woman who outsmarted the system. I kept walking. I didn't need to read the story. I had written my own. I saw him from the window before anyone said a word. Thin, pale, and standing outside the glass doors of our headquarters like a man who no longer recognized the building he once helped design. His clothes hung differently now, not in style, but in weight. Like success had been stripped off him, thread by thread. Even from 5 stories up, I could see it in his posture. Daniel had come to see me. But I had nothing left to say. He didn't try to get past security. Maybe he knew better. Or maybe he simply didn't have the strength to pretend anymore. He stood silently, clutching something, a folded jacket, maybe a bag, while our security team observed him with quiet unease. I turned from the window and picked up the envelope I had prepared days ago. I knew this day would come. I had written the letter on a calm Sunday morning, long before his calls had stopped. No anger. No poetry. Just clarity. I placed it inside a cream-colored envelope, along with 2 other things, the divorce papers, and a certified copy of the bank record proving that every asset was now under my name, legally, irrevocably. I handed the envelope to our head of security. Please give this to Mr. Morrison. And don't let him inside. He nodded, then disappeared down the elevator. I stood by the window again, watching as the envelope changed hands. Daniel opened it slowly, like a man afraid of what truth might weigh. I watched his shoulders drop as he read. He stood there for a long time after, motionless, swallowing the reality he could no longer delay. He didn't look up. He didn't try to make a scene. He simply turned and walked away, one slow step at a time, out of my life for good. In that moment, I felt no triumph. Only peace. Because closure doesn't always come with drama. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in the shape of an envelope, a signature, a truth that no longer needs to be explained. Daniel had once stood beside me as we built an empire. Now he stood outside it, stripped of every illusion, holding the last proof that I had survived everything he tried to bury me under. And I hadn't just survived. I had won. On my own terms. That envelope was the last conversation I ever needed to have with Daniel. But he didn't see it that way. 2 days after he walked away from our building, a message arrived in my inbox. The subject line read, "Just one more talk." I didn't open it. I didn't need to. He had already said everything in the choices he made. Still, the world around us didn't slow down. The legal process was closing in. The Department of Justice had opened an official case. Investigators had begun compiling evidence, not just of the fraud itself, but of the elaborate shell game Daniel played with offshore accounts and forged authorizations. Carla had vanished. Her name no longer appeared on any documents after the Zurich freeze. Whether she had left him or was simply hiding, I didn't care. Vanessa confirmed what I had hoped for. With the divorce papers signed and the company fully under my name, I had not only protected my legacy, I had insulated it. Daniel had no claim to anything. No legal ground. No leverage. But he wasn't ready to disappear. He showed up again. Not at the office this time, but at a tech conference we had both attended for years, one of the few public appearances I had agreed to make post-crisis. I was due to speak on innovation, on leadership, on resilience. He wasn't on the guest list. But somehow, he managed to get in. I saw him just before stepping on stage. He looked worse than before. Hollow. Eyes ringed with regret and something more desperate, a need to matter again. He didn't speak. Just stared as I walked by. I didn't stop. I gave my keynote as planned. The applause felt different this time, not because of pity, but because they knew. They had seen what I'd been through. And they recognized something in my voice that had been forged in fire. Afterward, I returned to my hotel and found a note slipped under my door. Please. Let me explain. Let me apologize. You meant more to me than anything. It was signed with just his name. No flourish. No pride. I tore it in half and threw it away. The decision had already been made. In the letter I had sent with the divorce papers, I had written one final truth: you underestimated the person who helped build your success. You forgot that I was never your shadow. I was your equal, and more. That was all he ever needed to know. And now, there was nothing left for him to say. No more letters. No more calls. No more chances. The first time I walked back onto a stage as the sole CEO of Morrison Technologies, it wasn't triumph I felt. It was certainty. The kind that comes only after you've lost everything and found your footing. Again, not by being saved, but by saving yourself. The stage was set in New York, beneath high industrial lights and a roaring crowd. It was the International Tech Innovation Summit, a place I had once dreamed of speaking at. Now, I stood at the center, not as a guest of someone else's success, but as the architect of my own survival. I looked out across the room, the spotlight warming my face, and I breathed in. Not just air. Freedom. I began the talk with a simple line. One that had echoed in me since the first moment I found that email on the forgotten tablet. Sometimes, betrayal is just the beginning of our true freedom. The room fell silent. Then came the nods. They understood. I didn't tell them every detail. I didn't have to. The essence was enough. I had been betrayed by the man I built everything with, nearly erased from the very company I had helped create. And yet, I was still standing. Stronger. Sharper. Unapologetically whole. In the months that followed, the company flourished under new leadership. Not just mine, I brought in fresh voices, rebuilt trust from the inside, and reimagined what Morrison Technologies could be without shadows hanging over us. Investors returned, cautiously at first, then with full confidence. Clients praised our transparency, our renewed focus. But beyond the numbers, something deeper had changed. Me. I no longer saw leadership as a role to share by default. I saw it as a responsibility to protect, not just for myself, but for every person who had ever been underestimated, sidelined, or deceived by someone who couldn't handle their strength. The betrayal, as cruel as it had been, gave me something no boardroom ever could. It gave me truth. Not about Daniel. About myself. I learned that survival isn't just about endurance. It's about clarity. About standing in the wreckage of what someone tried to take from you, and rebuilding with your own hands. I never saw Daniel again after that conference. The last I heard, he had taken a consulting job overseas. Quiet, low profile, a far cry from the empire he tried to steal. There was no formal apology. No final act. Just silence. And that was fine. I didn't need closure. I had created my own. Now, when people ask how I survived it, how I kept my voice, my company, my name, I tell them the truth. I didn't survive it. I mastered it. And I turned it into something greater than revenge. I turned it into power. My power. And I will never hand it over again.